I'm the CEO of Lawn Starter, which is the leading marketplace for outdoor home services. Um, we've basically scaled doing things like lawn mowing and landscaping from one city in 2014 to 100 cities in 2019, growing 100% year over year, and have been engaged with Rob for a little over a year now. So for us, we decided that we wanted to bring in a coach, um, not because of just one thing. I think over the previous few years, we had realized that from building the right culture to executing against a playbook, we just weren't the A players that we felt we could be. And one of our mentors and investors who built a $100 million company that he bootstrapped, told us that the scaling up framework and finding the right coach was a great opportunity to level us up as individuals, as well as level up the rigor in kind of executing and planning within the company. So we talked to several different consultants to determine who we wanted to go with. And what we found a lot of the time was there were professional coaches that experience mainly consisted of being a professional coach, which may or may not be good. But for us, in order to build the rapport that we wanted with the coach, we felt that it was absolutely critical that they were an operator in the past and understood what it meant to scale a company, not just what it meant to understand the framework. Um, and when we found Rob, basically what we determined was, as a four-time CEO with four successful exits, in addition to being a coach for many, many years, he was going to bring both what I needed as an individual and what the company needed from a framework and actual experience and mentorship. Sure. So once Adam, our investor, recommended that we go ahead and take a look at scaling up, we read the book, and it was clear that somebody much smarter than ourselves had gone through and kind of created a framework that made a lot of sense. And once we read the book, we were pretty sold on the concept, but it took talking to several different coaches and ultimately finding Rob for us to decide that it was in fact the process that we wanted to utilize. Sure. So I think first and foremost is probably our hiring process. It's gone from something that, although we felt it was really strong, it just simply wasn't, to something that we've had basically no dud hire since we switched to. This has led to us winning 11th best place in Austin to work, which is obviously building a great culture. And then on the strategy side, I don't think I think we always said we were building a multi-billion-dollar company, but we didn't put the pen to paper on what that meant and back that out from quarter to quarter. And now we've got a multi-year plan that we've consistently been able to hit that breaks down all the way to 1 week sprints essentially. And it's just changed the structure of our company. It's changed the stress of our company, and it's really helped us grow a lot faster. So I think that as a young founder, I was 21 when we founded it, I'm 27 now. Um, you can be a little cocky and think that you figured a lot out. And when we decided to bring in the coach, we kind of determined that, look, you know, we're not where we could be as individuals, and we want to double down on our own personal growth. And through things like the multipliers book that Rob introduced me to, different time management skills, different tips that he's given for meetings, I think I've gone from what I would consider like a young leader that had a vision, but probably couldn't execute on that as well as possible, to somebody who now I think does a pretty solid job of consistently getting everyone where we need to be and doing it in a way where folks are happy. So I think that the first thing to understand is being on the same page may sound very easy, but our business is extremely complicated. So different leadership positions touch different parts of the business and have very different thoughts. So by solidifying a 3 HAG and a BHAG and quarterly rocks, we're able to much more consistently be on the same page right off the bat. And so rather than consistently go over the same things or disagree on points, we've got line of sight into what we need to do. And what we're able to do as a leadership team then is make the right trade-offs to get us there, as opposed to, be arguing where we're going. Sure. So I'll start with hiring. We use the Who method. It's been completely game changing. Uh, it's made us much more efficient. It's made us look much more impressive to candidates, and most importantly, it's made us hire A players, and at least in our opinion, in every role that we've hired since implementing this method. From there, when you think about leadership development, we really didn't have anything structured in place. We're a small company. We have 100 plus folks total, but the majority of those are out of the office support and sales reps. There's only 27 people in the main office, and so we didn't have the infrastructure to invest in leadership training necessarily. But with Rob, we've been able to have consistent coaching for the tier under the executive team, and really elevate them, and also make them feel like they're elevating in their career, which is obviously super important. Yeah, I think those are the main people related things we've seen. Sure. So I think we were always pretty decent on meetings. Um, we don't like to waste a lot of time, so I think that was pretty effective. Where we were nowhere near as effective as we are now, I think the first thing would be scorecards. We've been able to take all the lack of clarity out of every role, and people know what they're evaluated on. People know what they need to do, and this makes they cut to the quick, and basically people are able to execute on what they need to execute on. And at the end of the day, that's wholesale because of the scorecards. It's changed the stress between manager and direct report. It's changed our ability to hire, and it's huge. Additionally, the rocks plans and the 13-week race plans. So we did KPIs that were kind of like rocks, but I don't think we took it seriously enough. We didn't do a massive planning ahead of time, and because of that, it just goes back to our execution and our strategy wasn't perfectly aligned, and things changed a lot. With the rocks process now, we're able to really highlight what we need to execute on, and then using our swim lanes that we've put together for multiple years, we're able to break it down into a 13-week race plan, which works really well for some teams. For other teams, it's not as effective, like product. But for things like sales and ops and engineering, it's game changing for making sure we make the right progress and know exactly what we need to knock out each week. Sure. So as a startup that's rapid growing, you know, I think the simplest way to think about it is we we burn a little less than $1 million yearly, about 750K, um, and that number has decreased dramatically year over year while growing over 100%. And when you look at our peers in the space, to go from you know tens of millions of dollars in revenue, and have 100 plus percent growth, a lot of folks are spending pretty substantial amounts of cash to do that, having burns of 5, 6, $7 million. With us, we've got $11 million in the bank, and we're burning less than $1 million. It gives us optionality for days to do whatever we need to do. And a huge part of that is because of the focus on those fundamental unit economics and profitability. That's always been really key to our DNA. So I wouldn't say it's the biggest area of improvement, but it has given us the right mechanisms to think about how do we make sure everything we're doing is profitable. I mean, the first quarter that we decided to do burst consulting, we were able to cut about $500,000 in silly costs, and that was like renegotiating with our payment processor, et cetera, et cetera. And without the focus on profitability, we wouldn't have done that. We may have always been a great unit economic business, but we weren't as scrappy as we like to think of ourselves as, given it's a core value. Sure. So I think there's three different pieces to this. I thought a good bit about this. So the first is the company and the actual profitability that's driving. So when you think about a company like ours that's doing, hopefully we'll do north of 50 million in revenue. this year. Um, Being able to get the ROI you need just from a pure cash flow basis is pretty simple. If we're able to get an extra 0.1% um, profitability out of you know out of our top line revenue number, um, we're going to be able to pay for the service itself. So there's the immediate ROI that can easily be calculated. Um, the second thing is the growth in personnel. So being able to look at the strategy and just identify what we had as goals, what we were able to change those goals to, and being able to hit those, direct ROI measure. When you think about the leadership development, though, it's really hard to quantify that. It's something that if you think about how much it costs to replace an executive, I'm doing 2 searches right now where we're paying $75,000 to executive search firms. Just losing one executive because they're not developing, or we don't have the right leadership style, or we don't have somebody with a lot of experience helping us. It's gonna cost immediately right there $75,000 plus ramp up time. So there's the personnel side to it, and then last, I think completely selfishly, um, you know, this isn't going to be my last company. It's my first company. I want to build a dozen companies. Um, and being able to be invested in personally by our company and have it paid for, it really makes me feel like some of the stresses and the ups and downs of running a startup are more worth it, because I know that I'm getting better at my role. I'm getting better at being able to build companies. And I think that I can't put a measure on. But my own personal satisfaction and happiness is driven pretty massively by knowing that there is that growth during the dark times. Because even though we're doing great right now, we'll have another dip, and then things will be great, and then a dip, and things will be great, and it all evens out to a nice upward trajectory. Sure. So something as simple as the core purpose, from our perspective, was really goofy. Initially, it was something that we look at like a large company and we think someone overpaid to come up with that. And that was very wrong. What having something like a core purpose does, at least in our experience, is it can solidify the company around some sort of a goal that's larger than itself. So for us, our core purpose on both sides of the marketplace is to save people time so that they can spend it with their loved ones and doing things that matter. And this year we'll save over $500,000, or sorry, 500,000 hours of time people would have spent on the lawn that they're now spending with their family, and pay out tens of millions of dollars to pros so they can live a better life. And that's really meaningful. And I think that when you look at some of the BHAGs, the 3HAGs, the core purpose, what all of these do is they give you this guiding light that gets the company excited, but it also is a true north. If we're trying to save time, then sometimes we're going to have to make hard trade-offs, because we know that's what our customers need. It's what we want to deliver, and it's what we believe in. The white space exercise also is pretty interesting. When you're forced to look at yourself versus your competitors in an intellectually honest way, you start identifying what you're really good at and what maybe you aren't as good at, but what may or may not matter. And for us, it solidified basically the four core pillars of success for us, which if we can execute on those four individual items, which although challenging gives clarity, we know we're going to win the space. And other things we've decided that we don't care about. So the white space exercise is great, but I think the biggest of all of these is the swim lanes. So we're trying to add additional verticals. We're trying to add, a massive number of people to the team. We're trying to grow continued 100% year over year. We have a goal of being by 2022 nearly at 200 million in revenue, and to do that is very challenging. But before, we just had these goals and we couldn't back into what it took to make them happen. With the swim lanes exercise now, we go, oh, well, shoot, if we need to hit this revenue number, that means we're going to have to offer pests. To offer pests, we need to have a 12-month head start on the SEO side. Okay, that means 3 months ahead of that, we need to have 3 additional butts and seats, high quality folks on this part of the SEO team. And being able to break it down into what it takes to kind of do well in all those pillars, um, that's completely game changing, and probably the most important thing on the strategy side, or the strategic thinking side for us. So I think this one's goofy, but the single biggest takeaway is just that we're doing things pretty well. My co-founders and I are all around the same age, 27, 28, 29. This is really all we've done professionally. And it is very hard to tell what you're doing well, what you're doing poorly, where you're improving, when you have no frame of reference, right? We're growing very fast. We win a top workplace, but what does that actually mean? And by having Rob in there as a coach, he can tell you, hey, these things are great. Here's a benchmark. Here's what these other companies look like. And look, we've raised $25 million. I have really, really successful world-class investors, but most of them aren't operators. And so having Rob be able to tell us, hey, these things are going well, is really, really good to hear. And then also, I think one of the biggest areas that he came in is with the ideal team player. I think myself, Ryan, and Jonas really struggled across several different pieces of the ideal team player. I don't think we realized it. And having Rob in there to, on the opposite of tell us what's going really well, tell us, hey, you're just not at the leadership level you need to be. Here's the steps that we're going to take to make it happen. That's probably the biggest takeaway for us. And then the last thing I would say is just how planning, although it can seem like a huge time suck, because it is, it's so important to make sure that you have that discipline to really plan, to plan effectively, stick to a plan. And if you're going to change that plan, have damn good reason why, and get buy-in from the company. So I think those are some key takeaways. So I think a lot of fast scaling companies are kind of dumpster fires. I think we were no exception. Um, we had a couple skills and we had some sharp people, and that got us to a certain place. But when you have 100 support and sales reps, when you have 50,000 customers, 5,000 providers, you really need to have excellent execution. You need to be able to automate a ton of things. You need to eliminate a lot of the ambiguity in running a business. And I think our business is now not a well-oiled machine, but a machine that at least has some oil in it. And that's really the result of the coaching, but it's also the result of our entire team's buy into the coaching, and that starts with the CEO and goes down. If I'm told in the meeting that I have these areas that I'm not a multiplier, or these areas where I'm weaker interpersonally, and I don't say, okay, well, shoot, I need to go and fix that and put real effort towards it, nobody else is going to buy in. Nobody's going to take the time to do the discipline planning, and I think that our buy-in has been a huge part of why we're seeing the transformation of the company. If you want to build a company that you can enjoy running, that enables itself to run effectively, that isn't just fighting one fire to the next fire to the next fire and feeling like you're making no progress, the scaling up framework is a great way to do that. What I'd say about the coaching process is, you have to get someone that you truly, truly believe in, because a lot of these things, although they may be intuitive, are frustrating, sometimes can seem stupid. But once you implement them, you realize how important they are. So I would say the most important piece of the coaching process is buying in, but then finding a coach that you really believe in. For us, operational excellence was absolutely non-negotiably critical. We were unwilling to just go with somebody who was a professional coach and that's all they did. And after we found Rob, um, we were able to buy in wholesale to this process. The other thing I'd say is, there are some other coaches that their goal is to help you solve your problems, as in, this is what your goal as a company should be. That's not necessarily how the coaching process with Burst works, and I think that's way better. Rob will weigh in and give you some thoughts, and kind of help, direct you when you have questions. But really mainly it's about making the people who know the problem best get the right solutions out there. And Rob helps facilitate that, whether that's by training individuals, whether that's by implementing a framework, whether that's by, giving us different assignments, to do ahead of planning. He's really helping to shepherd us to where we need to go, but he's not setting where we need to go. He's not, you know, trying to make minute details about running the business. What he's doing is he's giving you the framework to succeed, because ultimately the only way your business is going to succeed is if you and your team are the right people to run it. And if they're not, you need to augment that team. Um, Rob's not suddenly going to fix the fact that you don't have a real engineering leader. But what Rob will do is help you put together the swim lanes on how you go from a weak engineering org to a world class one, and why that matters for your company. If you're not bought in, it's not worth doing. If you're not willing to put in the time to go through these strategic planning sessions, to critically think about where your culture is actually at, to re-examine your hiring process. Now, these things don't all happen at once. They're piecemeal. We're still working through tons of them. But if you're not prepared to do that mentally, then it's not yet the time for you to dive into this. I think in one's personal evolution or in the evolution of a company, if it's going to be successful, the founding team or the executive team has to look inward and say, there's something that can be done better. And when you find yourself doing that, whether that's from a hiring, a personnel, a training, a strategic thinking, a long-term vision, an execution, a profitability point of view, this framework and really explicitly Rob can help you, can help you get there, but you've got to be bought in, just like anything. Overall, though, this business was in a bad spot when we engaged Rob. Not like we were going to run out of money or die, but we had kind of lost our way. We had a few members on the executive team that didn't see eye to eye, and I wasn't happy. We weren't building the company I wanted, and it kind of felt like we couldn't make it better. With Rob, he was able to help us help ourselves, and we were able to kind of trim the executive team, get on the same page, set up a vision, and have 2 years of really great growth that enabled us to take down a growth round of capital that got us to a point where we're going to be profitable hopefully next year, and got us to a point where we're now the largest lawn maintenance company, residential, in the world. And that's hugely or largely in part due to the work of Rob and Burst Consulting, and explicitly their implementation of the scaling up framework. And what I would just say is, like, look, the people who are best at selling their coaching services are professional coaches that are just professional coaches. But when you cut through kind of all the BS, what you realize is, if you don't have the operational experience, if you haven't sat there negotiating a Series B term sheet, if you haven't, looked at a model and known that you have to fire a bunch of people, if you haven't negotiated massive contracts, you just don't know what it's like. It's kind of like being the NFL analyst who played high school football. It just simply isn't the same as when Gronk or somebody is up there telling you what they need to do off the line, right? And with Rob, you get the benefit of experience coaching, experience working with leadership teams, but also the benefit of knowing what it takes to grow a company, and knowing that the scaling up framework is not the end all be all. For us, we've said, hey, some of these pieces of the scaling up framework just aren't for us. Some of them are even more critical than it may seem. So this process has changed the company. This process has changed our leadership capability. And ultimately, I think it's going to be the best decision I ever made, besides dropping out of school and actually making the company.